Our movie begins with Luli telling her story, saying she finally achieved her dream of becoming a doctor, recalling her childhood memories when teachers asked the kids about their dreams. And at that time, Luli answered with full confidence, saying she wants to be a surgeon because she wants to help people and make her family proud of her. And then when her friends mocked her, saying her father is already dead and her mother cooks food for the poor. But Luli doesn't care about what anyone around her says, despite the frustration she feels, yet she worked hard and achieved her dream. And the story starts with Luli going to a party with Diego, her boyfriend, and Diego tries to talk to her about something important. But Luli is very happy and wants to celebrate getting into college, keeps dancing and singing, then orders food, not paying attention to Diego, who is waiting for her to focus so he can talk. And when he gets fed up with her, he interrupts her and says he wants to drop out of college. So Luli gets upset with him and says that ever since he came back from Canada, he's been saying he'll drop out of college, and asks if he wants to go back to live with his mother in Canada. So he says his mother actually wants him to continue college. And then Luli interrupts him again, thinking about what she'll eat, and suddenly Diego feels pain in his leg. But Luli doesn't care, despite being about to become a doctor, and keeps thinking about what she'll eat. So Diego gets very angry and says he's going to the bathroom, and Luli's close friend, named Stephanie, comes, making Luli look at Diego, who is standing talking to the university professor named Paula. So Luli gets very jealous and orders food, keeps sitting waiting for him. And Diego comes back, and Luli, upset, asks him if he opened his heart to Paula yet or not. So Diego says she at least knows how to listen to him. So Luli gets very angry and keeps talking to Diego realistically, saying she's fed up with his drama and that if he wants to drop out of college, he should, because he doesn't deserve to be a doctor anyway. And Diego gets hurt by her words and apologizes for her rudeness at the moment when Professor Paula comes, asking them if they're okay. And Luli is very upset with her. And suddenly Diego struggles to breathe and asks Luli if there's shrimp in the food. So Luli realizes he has an allergy to shrimp, and Diego faints and is taken to the hospital. And in the ambulance, Luli asks him why he didn't tell her about his shrimp allergy. So Diego says he told her 1,000 times, and Luli feels bad about herself, realizing how selfish she is and how she doesn't care about those around her, and apologizes to him, saying they can celebrate their relationship anniversary anywhere. So Diego says everything between them is over, and he gets angry with her, and Luli returns home sad, sleeps late, and her mother wakes her up for college, being very late, and her mother prepares food for her, and asks how Diego broke up with her in the ambulance, saying no one forgets something like an allergy. So Luli says Diego talks a lot, and she can't focus on everything he says. So her mother gets upset with her and says she didn't raise her to be this selfish. So Luli says that's the truth and quickly leave the house, being very late, and sees Julio, her childhood friend, pushing his car, and she apologizes because she's late and runs toward the bus, catching it at the last moment. And Luli is very excited for her first day at college, and suddenly an old lady enters the bus, and Luli keeps praying someone else gets up, and one of the seated people gets up, and Luli is very happy because she won't have to stand the whole way. And Luli arrives at college, changes her shoes, and Stephanie, her close friend, comes, and Luli tells her that Diego surely won't come because he dropped out of college. And suddenly Stephanie sees Diego and Paolo walking together. So she tells Luli she doesn't think he dropped out at all, and Luli sees him and gets very jealous, keeps walking behind them. And Paolo is a professor responsible for their training, and Diego is with Luli in the same training, and Luli tries to ignore him the whole time. And they go to their first training, where they watch a surgical operation, and their Paolo directs all her talk to Diego, and it's clear she's impressed with him. And Luli can't stand what's happening, and is very jealous. So Stephanie tries to calm her down, and then they enter a clinic with multiple patients, and Paola takes him to one of her patients to learn how to talk to him. So Luli smiles and goes to another patient who is in pain, and the patient tells her he feels severe pain in his kidney. So Luli tries to get a painkiller injection, and Paola sees her and asks what she's doing. So Luli says the patient is in pain, and she's giving him a painkiller. So Paola smiles and asks if she thinks she's already a doctor, and Luli tries to respond but can't. So Paola takes the patient's file and asks her if she knows whether he's allergic to the painkiller she has, and Luli says no. So Paola tells him the most important thing is to read the patient's file carefully before taking any action, and Luli apologizes for her excessive enthusiasm and stays quiet for the rest of the training. And Paola tells him about the symptoms the patient, named Oscar, is suffering from, resulting from alcohol addiction, like lack of motor coordination and balance issues. And Paola asks about the correct diagnosis for his condition. So Luli and Diego answer at the same time, say it's a stroke due to a problem in the cerebellum, which is responsible for balance, and their answer is correct, but Luli doesn't care and keeps ignoring Diego, and then they go to the MRI room to confirm the patient actually has a stroke. And Luli and Diego are together in the MRI room, and the trainees are distributed other places. And Diego and Louie keep annoying each other, competing over who will talk to patient Oscar first and who will reassure him more. And Diego leaves and enters control room. And Louie looks at Oscar and feels he resembles her father, telling him his eyes and look are like her father's. So Oscar smiles and encourages her. And Louie enters a control room where the MRI scanning happens. And the patient has a safety button in his hand to press if he feels pain. And suddenly the power cuts off. The screens fail, and the person responsible for the scanning calls IT to fix the screen issue, telling them not to touch anything. And Louie gets very worried about Oscar and doesn't listen to the technician, entering to check on him. And Diego runs after her, trying to stop her. And as soon as they both touch the patient, they get a shock from the magnetic waves in the machine, and they faint. And after this incident, Louie's life changes completely. And Louie wakes up, finding her friend Stephanie beside her, and asks if Oscar is okay, learning her diagnosis was correct and he has a stroke. And then Louie asks about Diego, who is behind a curtain, and Stephanie says Paula stayed with him until he woke up. So Louie smiles, thinking they're together, but Stephanie says definitely not. And then Louie hears Stephanie's voice saying the opposite of her initial answer, that they're definitely together. And Louie looks at Stephanie, shocked, because she didn't move her lips. And Louie asks about Paula and Diego, hearing Stephanie's voice again saying to herself that Louie is pitiful, saying she doesn't want to lie but can't confront her with the truth. And Stephanie didn't move her mouth at all. And Louie keeps looking at her lips, unable to believe what's happening. So Stephanie tries to ask if she wants to kiss her or something. And Louie realizes she can now read people's thoughts. And Stephanie goes to call Paula, saying, Louie woke up. And as soon as Stephanie leaves, Louie quickly escapes, shocked by what's happening to her, and meets her friends while walking, hearing their thoughts, and quickly escapes an entire hospital, riding the bus, where every time she touches someone, she hears their thoughts, like someone thinking about the food they'll cook or someone standing wishing to sit, but no one gets up. And Louie feels like she's going crazy and goes to Julio, her friend, who is a volleyball player, waiting for him until he finishes his training. And Julio is a very professional player but not a starter in the team. And after practice, the coach calls him, saying he wants him on his team, but Julio says his knee is injured and he might not be able to play. So the captain says he'll arrange for a medical checkup and then decide if he'll join the team. And Julio goes to Louie, who is waiting for him, and she tells him it was his dream to play on the team, and now the opportunity is in front of him, and he doesn't want it. So Julio says he's just injured, but Louie hears his thoughts and knows he's scared of the crowd and the many people watching him. So she apologizes for thinking he's lying to her and that he's not in pain at all, saying she understands him, and Julio hugs her, encouraging her, not understanding anything. And they return home together, and on the way, Julio tells her there's no such thing as reading thoughts, and that she's probably still not recovered from the shock and just needs a rest. And they enter the house together, and Louie's mother scolds her for not answering, saying she was worried something happened to her. And Louie hears her mother's thoughts, saying to herself that she's the reason for everything Louie is suffering from, that her coldness, harshness, and lack of care for those around her are her mistakes, not Louie's. So Louie tries to comfort her mother, responding to all her thoughts and apologizing, saying she's the best mother in the world. And Louie goes to take a shower, and Julio sits with Louie's mother, who tells him to get back together with Louie. So Julio laughs and says they were kids, but now her daughter is domineering and he can't handle her, and they laugh. And Julio calls Louie, saying her mother wants him to get back together, and laughs. So Louie smiles about what's funny, asking if he thinks she's cold, harsh, and emotionless. And Julio tries to calm her, saying they've grown up and each has a different life now. And Louie hears his thoughts, saying he's actually gay and likes boys, not girls, and she's shocked and tells him she knows the reason. But Julio keeps denying, saying he's not gay. So Louie tells him to swear he's not gay, and Julio suspects he can actually read thoughts. So he counts in his head to 5 so Louie can't read his thoughts. And she smiles, and Julio is shocked, asking how she knew, confirming her ability to read thoughts, and begs her not to tell anyone he's gay. So Louie tells him to promise not to tell anyone she can read thoughts, and Stephanie walks in on them. And as soon as Louie and Julio see her, they both easily confess about each other, and they reconcile, go out of the house, and talk comfortably. And Louie is very upset, saying she wishes she could stop reading people's thoughts. So Stephanie tells her she should use her talent to find out if Diego really loves her or not, and whether Paula is actually interested in Diego. So Louie decides to confirm it herself, and one day at the hospital, she finds Diego talking to her, and before she apologizes for the incident that happened to him, she finds him treating her normally, as if they're not broken up, and she thinks he forgave her and decided to get back with her, and he tells her he loves her, and Louie tries to read his thoughts, but doesn't hear anything, and suddenly Paula calls her, and sits with her alone. So Luli takes the opportunity to touch her hand and know what she's thinking. And Paula keeps saying she's worried about Diego because she's known him since he was a kid, as she was his father's assistant, who is also a surgeon. And Luli reads her thoughts, learning she considers Diego like her son and feels sorry for him because of his father, who is a very difficult person, and says he didn't receive any kind of love or support in his childhood because of his harsh father. And Luli is very happy with her words, realizing she only sees him as a son, and suddenly Paula tells her Diego lost his memory temporarily. So Luli smiles, asking about the last thing he remembers, and Paula says he doesn't remember the events of the last few days, but she's not sure until when exactly. And Luli gets upset, not knowing how confronted with the truth, and talks to her friend Stephanie, who tells her not to say anything and to live in the moment with him, and asks her to read their colleague Ricardo's thoughts, whom Stephanie is interested in, but Luli refuses, saying she doesn't want to pry into people's thoughts, and that everyone has a right to keep their thoughts private. And then they go with Professor Paula to the outpatient clinic, where they examine patients outside the hospital, and Luli manages to diagnose all the cases, and Paula and all Luli's friends are impressed with her brilliance. And Diego asks her how she diagnosed the patient so quickly. So Luli says she has a sixth sense, laughing, and Stephanie keeps touching Luli's hand whenever she wants to tell her something without anyone hearing, and Luli can no longer bear reading people's thoughts and gets nervous. So Stephanie takes her to her friend's fortune teller, and Julio arrives with his car, and the fortune teller holds Luli's hand and asks about her problem. So Luli says she can read people's thoughts, and the fortune teller thinks she's crazy, saying so in her mind. And Luli reads her thoughts and tells her she's not crazy, responding to all her thoughts, and the fortune teller goes crazy, unable to believe it, and Luli realizes the woman is a fraud and leaves, and the fortune teller begs her to work with her, saying they'll be the richest people in the world. So Luli, upset, tells Stephanie not to suggest anything else, saying the only one she wants to read is Diego, but he's the only one she can't read, and she gets tired in Julio's car, and he encourages her to tell Diego the truth instead of trying to read his thoughts. And at night, they go out together, and Luli sees Diego and stands with him, and Stephanie goes to sit with Ricardo, whom she's interested in, and Julio meets him. And at the bar, Luli suggests to Diego that they eat and says she won't order anything with shrimp, and suddenly Diego gets distorted thought about the day he went to the hospital because of his allergy, but they're not clear, and he can't remember anything, and he tells Luli to come with him because he has a surprise for her, and he takes her to his house, cooks for her himself, and says his father is traveling for a week, so they decide to spend the night together, and in the morning, Diego's father returns from travel and sees them together, treating Luli rudely and not caring about her presence, and he stands in their bedroom, asking Diego about something, and they all go out to have breakfast together, and Luli is very impressed with Diego's father, who is very famous and skilled, and tells him she'll be a surgeon, like him, and greets him, but she hears his thoughts saying she'll never be a surgeon. So Luli tells him she knows Dr. Paula, and says she's a very skilled doctor because she worked with him, and Diego's father gets angry, saying she's so skilled she's still working in a public hospital. So Luli tells him the poor need skilled surgeons like him and Paula, and a skilled doctor isn't just for the rich. So Diego's father says what Paula is doing is a waste of her time, which makes Diego argue with him, saying he's elitist and doesn't care about money, and if he thinks he'll work with him in his hospital, he's wrong because he has the right to choose where he'll work himself. And he tells his father that everyone like him dreams of having him as a father, and he doesn't know his worth, and he leaves. And Luli tries to calm Diego, understand what he faces every day from his father, and regrets not listening to him. And they go to the hospital together, and there Luli finds Julio doing a checkup on his knee because Ricardo convinced him not to be afraid of anything and to play the match without worry. And Julio does the checkup to submit it to the team management to confirm he's healthy. And suddenly Diego calls Luli, saying Oscar is very sick, and Luli rushes to him. And he says he wants to see his son just once, refusing his medication and the surgery. So Diego decides to go to his son and takes Luli with him. And there they try to convince his son to visit his father just once before he dies. But he says they don't know what he did to him, that he never attended his graduations or parent meetings, and left him waiting for hours outside school alone because he was drunk and forgot about his son. But Diego tells him he feels everything he's saying because his father wasn't there for him either. But the difference is Oscar's father has an excuse, being an alcoholic, while his father is a doctor with no excuses other than not caring about him. And Diego continues, saying despite everything his father did to him, he's still his father, and he'll keep believing he loves him in his heart. And Oscar's son agrees and goes with him to the hospital, fulfilling his father's wish, and convinces him to do the surgery. And Luli returns home, decided to confess to her mother that she can read thoughts, but her mother doesn't believe her, testing her. And Luli responds to every thought her mother has, impressing her mother greatly. and Luli learns her mother is interested in their neighbor Luis, and they laugh together. And then Luli's friends come go to Julio's match, cheering enthusiastically and happily, and Julio plays very well, feeling his friend support around him, and the team wins the match thanks to Julio, who gained confidence and played professionally in front of the crowd. And the next day, Oscar's surgery succeeds, and Diego and Luli see him with his son, happy they managed to mend their relationship, and Luli tells Diego he'll be a great doctor, and suddenly Diego feels very sick, say he feels short of breath, and suddenly remembers everything that happened, like the day he broke up with Luli and that she caused his hospitalization, and the day he was shocked by the magnetic waves in the MRI room, and he accuses Luli, saying she was lying to him and gets angry at her, and the doctors rush in, and Paola and the other doctors come to check on him to find the cause of his fainting. And suddenly Luli remembers Diego said he had shortness of breath, realizing he has a lung problem, and tells Paola he needs surgery because he has a lung blockage, and Paola checks him, confirming he has a clot in his lung, and they perform the surgery, saving him thanks to Luli. And Diego wakes up from the surgery, finding Luli, Paola, and his father beside him, who is very worried about him. And Diego feels for the first time that his father truly loves him, and Paola thanks Luli for being the reason Diego was saved. So Luli says she didn't do anything and that Paola is the best surgeon in the world, and Diego's father thanks Paola, despite previously doubting her abilities, as she saved his only son's life. And Paola leaves with Diego's father, and Diego asks Luli about the kind of help she gave him. So Luli says she listened to him, as he always told her to, and after a while, Diego and Luli graduate from college, and Luli tells him he'll be the best surgeon in the world because she decided not to be a surgeon, and Luli says she figured out what she really wants and discovered that everything that happened taught her what it means to listen to people well and understand their problems, and she decides to specialize in family medicine and continues her life with Diego happily. And the movie ends. Thank you for watching.